Sense of Soul.
Hey, Soul Seekers, it's Shanna. Journey with me to discover how people around the world awaken to their true sense of soul. Now go grab your coffee, open your mind, heart, and soul.
It's time to awaken.
Today on Sense of Soul, I have Lacey Burbage. She is a fourth generation folk healer, hereditary generational witch who follows a pagan animist path. As an ordained priestess of the goddess, she practices a nature-based tradition that has its roots in modern Wicca. Guided by the wisdom of green witchcraft, Lacey specializes in domestic magic, including hearth, cottage, hedge, green, and kitchen magic. She's also the author of the book Naturally Modern Magick, an essential compendium of spells, rituals for health, happiness, and prosperity. This book is filled with charms, spells, rituals, and everyday solutions using natural objects and elements. And she's with us today to share with us her magic. Please welcome Lacey.
Hi,
Hi, how are you?
I'm so good. How are you?
I'm good. Glad to be here. Finally, we meet. I'm so glad we were able to make this work.
Absolutely, me too. Thank you so much. I'm so grateful.
Oh, well, I am grateful as well. I love your book. It's beautiful, and I feel like it's going to be like my go-to. I have a few, but like even just holding it right now, I'm kind of got the goosebumps all over.
Oh, thank you so much. I had such a wonderful time writing it and cooking it up, I might say. And I refer to it lovingly like a cookbook. You know, a spell book to me is like a cookbook where if you need a recipe for a roasted duck or yams or something, you find that recipe, and that's what I wanted it to be. You know, I wanted you to be able to open it up and say, I need a spell for this, I need a spell for that, and it's in your book, you know.
Yes, I love it. And it's also very aesthetic. It's very beautiful. I like it.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yes, I'm super happy to have gotten it and to meet you and to learn about, who you are and how you came to be a good witch. I always think Sense of Soul listeners are a lot like me.
Yeah.
I'm a mom. I live in the suburbs. I'm like totally normal. And that's what's happening is like we're normalizing the woo kind of, right?
Yeah. Absolutely, absolutely. I like the way you said that we're normalizing the woo. And I think that that happens quite often, you know, when I meet my readers or my followers in real life and get to know them and get to know them in our Patreon community and things like that. We do Zoom calls and once a month and you know, like we're the witch next door. You wouldn't
Yeah.
necessarily look at us and think anything other than, you know, basically pretty average, right? Just a
Yeah.
mom. You get up, you go about your day and simply exist magically is really what I'm all about is how do we make seeing magic in everyday life, living in magic in everyday life and make it just a normal part of life. And writing the book, it was like if you have something going on and you need a spell for it, here it is, go grab your go-to. So I'm glad you said that.
Yes, and I feel like this is the time of that, especially for women. And, we don't have to worry about being persecuted. And many of the practices that I have, and oftentimes people will say they're so new age. I'm like, no, they're very old age, actually. They're very, very old.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. They might have been reinvented or rediscovered, but that the bare bones of it, right? The foundations of connecting to energy, connecting to earth, connecting to spirit, that's been in existence forever. And so ever
Yeah.
since we've had a consciousness, we've been able to consciously do it.
Yeah. Yeah. And without apology. And I have to tell you just to begin with, like I'm a ancestral genealogist. I have spent much of the past decade working on my own lineages and also, I don't hundreds of people, their lines. And so I've come across so many stories historically and also in my own. So I have a infamous witch in my lineage. So I'm French Creole. My family's been from New Orleans and in that area since the late 1600s, early 1700s. And I have Marie Laveau in my tree. I don't know if you know who she is, but yeah. So I grew up thinking she was a boogeyman. I grew up Catholic, but little did they know
Mhm.
she did too. And actually, she was a devout Catholic. And that's how the practice of voodoo kind of meshed with saints and stuff because she went to church every day. She was even named in one of her obituaries a sainted woman.
Mhm.
And I think that when I look back at even I had a Salem witch that I in a lineage that I worked with, not my own, but my best friend's actually. It was almost like women who, whether it was wealth or power or mystery or whatever it was, those are the ones who they persecuted, right? These are the ones they made into this Wizard of Oz green skinned witch, which I can't wait
Mhm.
to learn more about green magic. But yeah. So I'd love to, just I wanted to just share that with you that I also have this in my lineage. However, it was something that was hidden. And all the work that I've done, I know that I've healed many lineages. And I'll tell you, as I did this work, they lined up like for
Right.
miles for me to heal and to know them and to tell their stories.
It's often called the witch wound because of that lineage of persecution, systemically, epigenetically. All of us it, have that to a degree, and especially women from being persecuted for so long that we're afraid. We're afraid. One, the word witch historically has not been a good word. It's not really been something you used as a compliment. So now we use it more in reclaiming the word in a sense, reclaiming it for those who were persecuted for working with plants, who were persecuted for, believing in different practices or religions, or those who even didn't. If we look at a lot of folk practices, they take into account their particular religion. So if it's a religion of Christianity or an Abrahamic religion, then that's what they're going to communicate with. That's their higher power, or I call it divine essence, right? So it doesn't matter what your divine essence is or your higher power that you're connecting to, if one at all. You might even just have energetic beliefs, right? You might just believe in energy and not necessarily like that creator or a deity or something like that, right? But you can look throughout history. Magic has been practiced in one form or another everywhere, every culture, every time in space. And so again, it's to me, magic is the thing that connects us to the divine, whatever that divine essence is for you. And that's the thing that connects our physical world to the spirit world, whatever that is for you, right? And historically, many people who were persecuted as witches may not have called themselves witches, but to us in modern day, you and I in this conversation, and others who probably think a lot like us who are listening right now would probably say those things are like witchy, right? So
Yep.
those are things to kind of take into account when we're dealing with the witch wound and when we're dealing with sort of dissecting that. And you do that to an extent, and you're probably at this place now where you're sort of at a place of peace. You understand it, and you understand how it all kind of weaves together.
I love how you said reclaiming that, the
Right,
witch.
right.
It always, I felt this way during my journey, and I'm writing a book as well on really my journey through the Gnostic Gospels, which are,
Mhm.
were hidden and all this, but there was so much feminine energy in there and a mother God
Right,
figure. And
right.
so as I was processing all of it, there was a lot of rewiring that I had to do to accept any of it. Because I was like, wait a second, what? And then it was like, yeah, no kidding. Like Father, Son, and what, a Holy Ghost? Like, no, there has to be a mother within
Right?
a holy family. How can you not? And then it was just like, what? Like, how have we been so brainwashed? And I think about all of the dark mothers, right? Like
Hmm.
Lilith, right, is one that I've kind of connected with a lot. Or anytime there was any woman that seemed like she was a feminist of power and like a healer. I mean, even
Mhm.
women who were midwives. I mean,
Mhm.
doctors, healers. You know, this is even portrayed in Outlander. Have you watched
Yeah,
that
yeah.
Outlander?
Oh,
I love
yes, I love it.
Outlander. I mean, me too. Uh,
Yeah.
I mean, just like there's always this fear, I think people have, or men have really, truly, and women who aren't stepping into their own power. But today, like, this is the time, like, this is the age where we can do this. I feel like we're the first of our kind, and it's such a great time to be a woman, I think.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's a very empowering time to be a woman, and for all of the things that you just said, we could look, if we're looking historically, even a lot of the ideas that we have about witches and witchcraft come from medieval Europe, where we have the cunning folk. That's kind of the roots of this image that we have of the green witch or hedge witch in the woods or living at the edge
Yeah.
of town. But at that time, magic was practiced. It was sort of called high magic and low magic. So the cunning folk practiced low magic, and the trained astrologers practiced high magic, and the court magicians and ceremonial magicians, things like that. And so, again, people were practicing magic, but there was this almost idea of separation. And now there are also ceremonial magic magicians today and witches who might say that they practice ceremonial magic. So it's a little bit more nuanced for today, but we're thinking of it a little bit more cut and dry in a different period. But there was this idea that one was better than the other, or at least one was more of a profession and education training, and the other was just, oh, what the common folk do. That's what the cunning folk, the common witch, the common magic. That's what folk really means. If you're looking, to tie it to green witchcraft, you're looking at using things that are around you, things that you're familiar with. You're not gathering exotic ingredients. Again, that's where the folk magic or the folk healing comes in. And that's where it kind of can spiral, right? So if you know too much, you're too smart about your environment or things like that, you're a bit of a risk there. Maybe you're in competition with the royal magician or the ceremonial magician or the astrologer or what have you. And so we can kind of trace those lines historically and see where it sort of began. And then Christianity, of course, Abrahamic things came about and changed those views, and patriarchal. I think patriarchy's always been around, but all of that meshed together and took these historical contexts and sort of spun them. And now, thankfully, looking back, we can see where some of these things have happened and where these ideas have come from. And it's a much more empowering time knowing that I can call myself a witch. Everyone might not like it, and that's okay. I don't really care anymore. But
Exactly.
that's that witch wound healing, right? That's where you feel open, to be yourself. And even in the beginning of the book, to the little witch in all of us, may you always feel safe and free to live your life openly.
Yeah, that's the inner sovereignty to be free to be magical, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Just free to live your life magically, simply exist magically. And, looking to the past, you can use it to understand things. And then, thankfully, we're in a higher vibration now, right? We're in such a better place now where we can get over our limiting beliefs, move through those and come to a better place where we feel comfortable to practice magic and be witchy. I post on TikTok all the time and on social media all the time. I'll say, I'm not a therapist, but have you tried witchcraft? Go ahead, you
Oh.
deserve it. Like, you deserve to be yourself, right? If you're called to this.
And you know what I think of witchcraft as? It's like here, okay, if you can experience your energy or energy, and
Mhm,
this is just like you said, a recipe to direct your energy
mhm,
to something specific, which we do all the time anyways.
right.
And I also think about how many times have you heard growing up your mom or dad or someone older than you say, well, my grandma used to do it this way. This is what she used to do. And it's some total random thing you've never heard of, but it was something that was passed down by, from generations because they knew it worked. And
Right.
so those things stuck. But we do rituals every day. We just don't, I mean, even brushing your teeth is a freaking ritual. I mean, these
Right?
are things that, are done for a specific purpose, and we do them every day. Do we not? I mean, it sounds witchy, but
Mhm.
it's not. It's really not. We do them every day.
Yeah, absolutely. A ritual would really be anything that you do in a repetitive, ritualistic way. So if you make that a special moment and you have some intention to it, then it becomes a ritual. And that's really the gift of presence, right? So if you can be present in that moment, then it can become a ritual. That's one part of my method in spell crafting. Oftentimes I'll say, okay, well, what are we already doing? Okay, now let's make it a spell. So if you're already brushing your teeth, then you might look at the ingredients in your toothpaste. So mint is very cleansing. And so you look at the symbolic action of brushing your teeth, you're cleansing. So I want to make sure I only say sweet things today. If you do it every day, then it becomes a ritual. If you do it once, then it's a spell.
Well, that's so interesting. So doing something once is a spell.
Yeah, I mean, different views we could split hairs about it all day long, but I think that's a simple way to think of it. A
Mhm.
ritual, you're going to be sort of changing energy. A ritual, you could be honoring. You don't necessarily have to be doing magic to attract something to you or repel something to you. And so, in a spell would be different, where you have a specific desire. I want to attract or repel or cleanse or what have you.
Mm.
So sure, there's a bit of a difference that you could really go into detail, but I think that's an easy way to really define it is a ritual is longer. So if you're doing it every day, it's going to be a ritual. A spell is going to be shorter and quicker. If you're going to do it once, maybe twice, then it's a spell.
Okay. When I was doing my ancestry, I did come across this old folk tale that was passed down, and that the old momos would tell their children, and at night they'd scare them. I don't know why, but they would, with this tale about how if you didn't go to sleep and didn't listen to your parents or whatever, this werewolf would come and get you. And this werewolf was called the Lugaroo. And so I did some research on the Lugaroo, and I discovered that it was a story that was based off of a real event, supposedly, in this small fishing town that my family all lived in. And this priest that hurt one of the children. And they all got together and they killed him. I mean, we're talking very Catholic people. And
Yeah.
so the rumor is, or the story went, that he turned into this, loup-garou that hunted and whatever was scaring the crap out of everyone in the bayou. And
Hmm.
so I'm reading it more, and they're saying that it's a curse. Like they're actually using this word curse. And I mentioned it to a few cousins. They're like, oh my God, well, what are you going to do? And I was like, wait, 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 wait. Like, first of all, the story is coming to my awareness. Okay. And it's
Hmm.
coming to my awareness because of all the work that I'm doing, and that
Right.
I've been doing. And I felt zero attachment to it. I mean, I'm telling you, like any work that I had been doing over the years by that time, like this story was just almost like a feather just blowing away. That's how I was almost visualizing it. But I was doing a
Mhm.
little research, like how would you undo a spell, which I love that you have, even in your book, at the beginning of your book, which I thought was really awesome. That's why I really love this book, and I will keep it close because you never know when you need to unwind a
Yeah,
spell.
absolutely. How to break a hex. Yeah,
Yeah,
different things
I
as well.
actually, I actually looked it up, and I had found directions, and actually was going to the root of how they would do this in Louisiana
Hmm.
within those practices and that culture.
Hmm.
I felt like that was important, that I connected that. That's kind of how I've been with all of my ancestry stuff. Like
Hmm.
I had a shaman in Canada, who was a First Nation. To connect with him, I went in the way that he connected, right? So, like, that's how I've learned different practices is actually through a lot of my ancestry. So, I did find this unwinding spell, um,
Hmm.
that would unwind it with, like, it was kind of like a prayer. And it felt right, and I think that that kind of like is something that us as women especially need to start really listening to that discernment. Like if it feels right, then it is. If it
Yeah,
doesn't feel right, then it's not. Like this is something that's been over generations, like combed out of us.
absolutely. I feel like we get so disconnected from our intuition. The thought just popped in my mind. Have you read the book Women Who Run with Wolves? Something like that.
Yes.
Yes, I
Yes.
see. Seems like you would have. So that's a good one to get that almost exactly what you were saying, sort of that animal instinct, that intuition. That's a really good one to get that inspiration and spark back. Ah, gosh, that one's a really, really good one. We get so disconnected from our intuition because we have so much from the actual physical world that we live in. So in the introduction to the book, I talk about, to simplify focused intention, is that there's the physical world that we live in, the mental world, and the spirit world. And so our spirit is connected to the spirit world, but we've also got that influence from the mental and the physical world. So those two are connected. Mental and physical are very easily connected, right? We can think things into existence, but we also have this cognitive brain. So we have those beliefs and things that might hold us back. So you might feel like you're really, really focused on what it is that you want, but you might have this underlying, voice inside your head that might be messing up your focused intention. And so
Mm.
it that you I say like feel it. Do you feel it more in your chest? Because usually that's fear and that's anxiety, or maybe you feel it a little bit more if you are clairaudient, clairvoyant, or clairsentient, or whatever. I feel things. So okay, I know that I feel things sort of get tingly here. And that's more of an intuition thing for me, or more of like a gut feeling. Do I feel it sort of in my belly? And I try to tap into that, try to tap into feeling to get back to my intuition. And then I have a friend, I actually, she helped me do a lot of rewiring my cognitive brain. And I was like, wow, this is really, if you're trying to heal and really practice magic and make it work, I think that rewiring that cognitive function and those underlying beliefs is really the foundation, the core to being able to connect the physical world, the mental world, and the spirit world. And that's really what you have to do. And that's the goal when we're doing magic. We're tapping into that energy, that spirit world. We're trying to communicate what it is that we want to happen, we desire, and then we give it up to the universe a little bit, right? This or something better. I usually try to end manifestations and things with a little bit of a clause there because I might not see the bigger picture, but the universe might see the bigger picture. But again,
Mm.
that's part of it. You've got to have a little part of that intuition. You've got to have a little bit of, feeling energies, knowing how energies work with you, and a little bit of that, surrender, give it up to the universe. And what I loved about when the book came together is I had so many people tell me that they wanted to stop just reading and consuming information about witchcraft and they wanted to start practicing it. And so the book is really made in a way, one, to be like your go-to to make it really simple and easy for you to just pick it up like a cookbook, like you want a recipe for this is what I want to happen, but also so you can practice and learn at the same time. You can practice while advancing your craft. You can learn about witchcraft while you're doing it because that's why it's a practice. I feel like we've heard that a lot
Yeah.
about yoga. It's a practice. You've got to keep doing it. Witchcraft is a practice. You've got to keep doing it. And that's really what
Mm.
witchcraft is it's your craft based on your experiences. We talk about that a lot in our Patreon coven is,
Can I say how much I love this, by the way?
oh yes, that's one of my favorite things, this little that
Stop. I was like, are you
bookmarker.
kidding
Yes.
me? I just got goosebumps again. I was like, that made it
Yeah,
special.
a little bookmarker. And that's one of those things really that, little details like that matter, right? Make us happy. That's tapping into that energy, that energy of joy and love and being able to shift into that mindset. Because before you cast a spell, you want to be able to ground and center your energy. You want to have the right
Mhm.
mindset, right? That's how we're connecting those worlds together.
I was very pleased to see that you started out with the grounding. If I'm correct, that was like your first chapter
Yes,
or the
grounding and
beginning.
centering and then
That's
protection.
And I feel the same way. Any energy that I work with, I feel like that's the most important, right? To kind of get into that space because you do have that monkey mind, all of this clusterfuck in your brain
Yeah.
that, if you just let it run rapid, it will.
Yeah, definitely. And I suggested anytime you're going to do magic, you're into energetic work of any kind, but especially if you're going to do magic, to get in the right state of mind before all the spells. I say sort of start them the same. You want to cleanse yourself and everything around you, your tools, your materials, sort of lay everything out and just cleanse them, ground and center your energy, make sure that you're in the right space. And then if there's some form of protection that you like to do, some traditions call for casting a circle, then some form of protection. And you don't necessarily have to do that before every small spell, because throughout time, if you're simply existing magically, you're just living life as a witch, you'll have different wards and protections up. If you're in your safe space, you're in your sacred space, then you might not need to cast a circle every time or whatever form of protection you choose. You probably already have some protection up. But, those are sort of the three main things I would say, you know, especially for beginners. If you don't know, these are like good things to do.
Okay, this is really actually kind of weird. I never thought about this ever. So it is like my ancestors are teaching me because I've had to, heal those lineages, learn who they were and all this. And through that, I learned these different methods of how to connect and how to protect, all these things. Oh my gosh, that's so cool. But I didn't have parents or a lineage that I knew personally that could teach
Mhm.
me these things, but you did, didn't you?
Well, in a way, I did. I did come from a very witchy, magical family. I don't think that all of them would have called themselves witches. Again, folk healer is usually what we tend to go with. So my great grandmother, my nana, and my mom and myself all are just a wealth of herbal remedies and
Yeah.
folk healing, old country sayings, old wives' tales. My mom will tell you what the weather is going to be like 6 months from now based on what the caterpillar looks like, or if it's going to rain, or if you should go fishing this day. She'll have all these things that she learned from her grandmother and have been
Yeah.
passed down. And so they really showed me a lot in terms of, okay, what folk magic is, what it really means like to learn from your environment, learn from the people around you, learn from your genuine experiences. And then as I got, I would say probably tween years, pretty early in my life, because again, witchy things were just very accepted in my home. My mom got a book on Wicca, like Wicca 101, or I don't know, Complete Idiot's Guide to Wicca or something, gosh, in I don't know, early 2000s. And she didn't really take to it, but I devoured it. And so I started learning about Wicca. So that's when I say my formal studies began, because they were more structured and there was this specific tradition that I was learning about and wanted to be initiated into. And so I wouldn't call myself Wiccan now. I've sort of left those circles, but I have taken from my genuine experiences and taken
Mhm.
that and created my craft. That's what witchcraft is. It's what you create. If you're a woodworker, that's your craft. If you're a knitter, that's your craft. If you're a witch, this is your craft. And so
Oh,
you
I
make
love
it
it.
based on what you learn in your experiences. And so it's more than just reading and gathering information. I've heard, not my original quote, but it is a great one. If all we needed was information, we'd all be millionaires with six-pack abs. And it's so true, right? So you don't need more information. You need to know what to do with it. And so the book is really here to get you going, get you practicing. Sometimes I'll do boot camps, or I've got a Patreon and, YouTube channels, YouTube videos that I put out, and things that I want you to start to put that information you've learned into
Yeah.
practice. We need
I
to
love this.
get you getting experiences, get you
Right.
developing your craft, get you, looking at what ties you have. Are they ancestral? Are they a little bit more immediate? And so my
Right.
family's from North Carolina, and I've since moved to the West Coast into the middle of the desert. So I've had to start from scratch, learning my environment, learning my region, learning what plants grow here, what plants naturally
Hmm.
pop up, which, what I can use in magic. And it's a beautiful experience getting to know the weeds that pop up in the garden and going, oh, wait a minute, this is wild lettuce. This was used in Europe to make flying oil. This is special. This is very sacred to my practice in a lot of ways, if I want to tie it back to the cunning folk and folk magic of the time.
So Mother Nature is teaching you.
Yes,
She's also, you're teaching
absolutely.
many of the medicines, even that, doctors and the health professionals deal with are also from the earth. many of them.
Yeah. Many of them start as plants or, taking a constituent or compound from a plant. And
Mm.
oftentimes that's what you're looking at in herbalism is you're looking at a whole, the plant as a whole, because you can't separate it in herbalism like you can in chemistry. You could take the individual compounds out or the individual constituents. And
Mm.
in herbalism, you have to look at the plant as a whole, and you do that in magic too. So you look at that plant as a whole and its whole energy, and what is it going to do, and how is it going to help you communicate? Because when you're taking it as medicine, you're communicating to the body, right? You're helping the body communicate better, helping it function better. And you can think of that in an energetic and magical way too. You're using that to help you communicate your intention. All of your ingredients are helping communicate. When I write spells, I break them down really into two primary things is there's the symbolic action. So that's what you're doing. If you're lighting a candle or filling a pouch, there's some symbolic action there. And then your communication. So what are you saying or what ingredients are you using? Because those ingredients have correspondences and they could be more traditional correspondences or they could be your personal correspondences. What in your tradition, your lineage, your experience works for love? Does lavender work for love for you? Or is lavender more protective for you? Or, getting to know the ingredients in the book, I talk about less of a tool and more of spiritual kin. These are your allies. These are, you're going to get your like top five plants that you work with all the time or top five, things. And they're not going to be tools anymore. They're going to become your spiritual kin. They're going to be things that you kind of have this mutual beneficial relationship with. And you learn that by connecting to the earth, just like you were saying, you do every morning, you connect.
I teach Reiki. And I feel that way about all my tools. Like I use my pendulum. I have one specific pendulum that really works good for me, and I have others that suck, right? Because the one that I've worked with has become extension of my intuition. And so I feel that way same about certain stones. I've got, actually I think I know all my stones very well, the gemstones that I have, but I know all my trees outside too. And they're also a part of my practice. I know the birds actually around here. Some of them I know very well. It's like they become part of your magic. Yeah. You become kin
Very
with them.
much.
I love that you said that.
Yeah,
Hmm.
very much, very much. I talk a lot about deeper meaning. Oftentimes I'll say, living in magic or living life magically is you have to see things differently. You have to see magic in everyday life. And it's deeper meaning. And it comes from a book I read a while ago called How to Read Literature Like a Professor. And so you're kind of reading between the lines. I actually thought about it when you were telling the mythology, what can we look at? Excuse me, what can we look at and what can we dissect from the mythology there? And what we look at in terms of that is the symbolism. So do you have a collective symbolism or personal symbolism? Memory, are there memories tied to this? And are there memories of, if you're looking at that character or the story, are there memories tied in that character? Does something recall something? And then pattern is something reoccurring. So if we're looking at it in terms of, you know, a bird showing up to you regularly, well, what is the symbolism of a bird? What is the collective symbolism? What does that mean to you? Do you have a special tie to hummingbirds or a special tie to that particular bird? And then what memories do you have that are associated with that? And is it reoccurring? So that's the pattern part. So if we're trying to connect more with nature or maybe look at signs and symbols, start a nature journal and then start to note those things. Start to
Mm.
note this and what shows up for you. What is the symbolism with it? What are the memories you have tied? And is it reoccurring? What is the pattern? Because magic goes on cycles and rhythms. So there's going to be a pattern. That's why we have seasons. That's why we have moon, working with those natural rhythms, moon cycles. It's so much a part of witchcraft because we understand the cycle and the rhythm of energy.
The triple goddess was a huge part of my journey over the past few years. I never even knew what it was prior. And it literally just happened naturally. And, for me to know it, and I even received it differently. And that's another thing I just want to say is listening to you. This is what I'm receiving. You could read as many books and you could, be taught this by someone else, how they do it. But really, it's through your own experiences. That's where the wisdom comes from. There's a huge difference. I mean, the smartest people I know are also the dumbest I know. You know what I mean? So there's a difference between that knowledge and wisdom that you experience to be your truth and your magic. And, it's so funny, but I looked up what the word crone meant, and sadly, it said hag. I'm like, this is so
Yeah,
ridiculous. Like, this is
I
the
could.
definition of a wise older woman. And when I think about my grandmother, I mean, God, she was one of the most beautiful people in the world and always had, the right answers. Like, you know what I mean? She always,
Yeah.
and even if she didn't, she came with like such wisdom. And I think that it's time for us to start honoring aging
Hmm.
and our
Hmm.
grandmothers in that age.
Absolutely, absolutely. I heard someone say one time that they explained it that, as humans, as anything that reproduces, one of the most important things is to continue to reproduce, right? That's what keeps us in existence. But humans are the only ones that actually go through menopause. And it's
Mm,
thought that because grandmothers are so important, their brains, their
mm,
wisdom, and all that they have learned are so important that evolution says you need to take a break. You're done having babies now. Now you've stepped into that wise woman. Now is the time. That's when you go through menopause, is when you're ready to sort of transcend to that season. And even in my circle, I was on the board of Sophia Center for Goddess Study here in Las Vegas, before they closed. And we would often,
wait, say that one more time.
oh, I was on the board for Sophia or Sophia Center for Goddess Study. They're no longer here in Las Vegas, but they were for quite a time. So I was on the board there, and we did a lot of goddess studies. I got ordained as a priestess to the goddess with them. And we would oftentimes do croning ceremonies for when someone had gone, had gone through menopause, and it was time for their croning ceremony or their second Saturn return, if I remember correctly, whichever happened first. And then after that was the hagging ceremony. So we did
Hmm.
two hagging ceremonies. So when you reached 80 years old, that was when we did hagging ceremonies. So there was plenty of birth blessings. I had two or three birth blessings there, and hand fastings and all kinds of different rituals and ceremonies. But I
Oh,
was very honored to be a part of several croning ceremonies and two hagging ceremonies.
what an honor. Yeah.
Yes, very
So
beautiful.
my study and even my book is called Desperately Seeking Sophia. So that has been
Oh,
my
I
story.
love that.
Yeah, that's very crazy. Not many people know the story of. So, and that's the other thing. So I study through Sophia through many synchronicities. I did not ever seek her. I mean, seriously, like the very first time I ever even
And she
heard.
found you.
Yeah, totally. There's this beautiful lady I was talking to, and she's like, yeah, I teach this course on Keys of Enoch and Pistis Sophia. And I was like, oh, I was so focused on Keys of Enoch. So I get online, I order the book, and then I'm like, I can't find the Priestess of Fear anywhere. So weird, I can't find it. And so then underneath the Keys of Enoch was, oops, was the Pistis Sophia.
Hmm.
And Keys of Enoch is pretty much the same. It's pearly, it's white with this gold etching. And all of a sudden I heard in my head her voice. She's from England, and she wasn't saying Priestess of Fear, she was saying Pistis Sophia. And I was
Mm.
like, oh my God, who the hell is that? And that was like years ago. And that's how I
I
got on
love
my
it.
journey with Sophia. So yes, this is kind of like my Sophia. And then right here is my ancestry, by the way.
No,
Lots of,
they're like
lots of,
altars.
yeah, it is. Yeah. And then the rest of us are color coordinated. But seriously, Lacey, that's amazing. Call her whatever you want. You can call her, Quan Lin. You can call her. Bridget, Morgan, whatever you want. I mean, it's the divine feminine, and she's wanting to be heard, wanting to be known. I
Mhm.
love, though,
Right.
that you've been doing this. For how long have you been, even knowing about a goddess?
So I would say, well, my formal studies began with Wicca in 1999 or early
Okay.
2000. And so that was probably my introduction to some type of goddess. At that time, my mother also my mom got the Wicca book, and then she got another one that was like Every Woman's a Goddess or something like that. They sort of kind of went together in terms of
Okay.
the belief system that the belief in a goddess. So it started when I was quite young, me sort of taking to it and learning about this idea of goddess within Wicca. And many of the Wiccan circles I was in were mostly goddess based versus in traditional types of Wicca, you might see a god and goddess oftentimes portrayed. And so they were all very focused. They were all women and all really loved the goddess, divine feminine and all of that energy. And so that's really what we worked with most of the time. Only a few times were gods sort of present on the altar or called into the circle or worked with. And then as I started to learn more, I found Sophia Center for Goddess Study when I first came to Las Vegas. And I had been working with many types of goddesses, you might say, had been, in touch with working with the divine in different ways. But in a lot of witchcraft or more so Wiccan circles, they will want you to find like a matron goddess. They might say a matron and patron deity. And I just never felt like one really called to me.
Well,
There was one, they might sort of pop up for a little while and things like that. And then
yes.
there was just this feeling of, okay, Earth Mother, Universal Dark Mother. And so I remember being in a meditation and like they told me their names almost. I see it in an animistic way more so than a deity form, but you might simplify it by saying Universal Dark Mother, like she's the universe, she's the creatrix, she's the one who fell, right, and created everything. And she created
Yeah.
Earth Mother, she created the earth. And so those are really the energies that I work with the most closely. Uh, and I feel that spirits come to you in the form that you need them. And so maybe I didn't need one that was clearly defined. I'm very much drawn to Venus of Willendorf and these faceless goddess figurines. And so maybe I didn't need a clear name. I needed it in my own language in my own way. Maybe I didn't need a different language to say Earth Mother. It was just in what she wanted me to call her and the connection that I had with her or the divine,
Yeah.
universal dark mother.
Okay, so I do have to ask you this though. Where did the green come in? Because that is one thing. So I haven't met many like you. Okay,
Mhm.
I'll be honest.
Well, thank you. That's a
But the
compliment.
but the ones that I have, who I love and hold deeply to my heart, because my journey is aligned with this. There's not a whole lot of us. Like, okay, so oftentimes I hear Archangel Gabriel is one that will come first for many people. But there's this green goddess. Okay, it happened for me. I know it happened for Kyra, the one who wrote Sophia Code, happened for Diana Kelly. It's happened for other people that I've talked to as well. So what is the green magic, and is there any connection to a green goddess?
There would be a connection in terms of how you see it and how you believe it, or how your beliefs lie. Green magic is when you work with earth, when you work with the
Earth.
earth. So you're working
Mhm.
with Mother Earth and the elements from the earth. And oftentimes closely the earth elements. So you're using a lot of plants, you're using a lot of crystals and maybe bones or animals, not
Mhm.
necessarily always animal parts,
Yeah.
but maybe animal spirits. Maybe you do use animal parts. A lot of us might, find a tortoise shell in the woods or something like that. That's something you're going to find in a green witch's house, is little trinkets and things like that.
Mhm.
Because we work very closely with the element of earth, but we also balance that with the other elements too. Um, and that might be a little bit more elemental witch, someone who works very closely with one particular element or a couple,
Yeah.
balancing the
I know a
elements.
water priestess. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. There's different ways you can work your magic. I always say you might say I'm a this type of witch based on what closely resonates with you. So it
Right.
might change, and that's totally fine. Green witchcraft is when you're working really closely with the earth. So
Okay.
not only do
I love
I work
that.
with Earth Mother, but I'm working with the elements that build the earth. I'm working with the element of earth and that energy from the plants, the spirit of the plants, the spirit of the rocks. That's what
Yeah.
green magic really is getting your hands in the dirt, getting your hands in plants.
I used to be a mass murderer when it came to plants. Gotten a
It's
lot.
taken me a while.
Well, okay, so it's interesting. So I never heard of Bridget in my life. Never.
Mhm.
Um, and it was all in one week, all in one week. I had someone who wrote a book, much like yours, but she's over in England and it's m- I didn't realize it at the time, but she even had rituals and prayers and all kinds of stuff to Bridget in that book. The next day, I had on a Bridget. She was the one who,
Wow.
Princess Sophia, right? She said that. Actually, her name was Bridget Finclair. And then I was having on this yogi band that I love, and he was going to release his song. And actually, he was coming on Halloween. So I'm laying down listening to his song, and he's just singing Bridget. And I'm like,
Wow.
who the fuck is Bridget? Like, is it his girlfriend or something? Like, he's a yogi band. I mean, like, what is this? And I'm like, what is all these Bridgets? And then I had gotten a new deck around that time. And I had this girl who set up a call. And I said, I have a new deck, can I pull a card for you? And I pulled Bridget. I mean, it was all
Oh,
in one
wow.
week, all in one week. I was like,
Talk
fine.
about a pattern.
I forgot the most important part. So my youngest daughter at the time, she was little. In the middle of the night, she used to call me in her room, and I'd go and lay with her. I wish she did that now. And so I went to lay with her, and she's like, Mommy, I have a new angel that visits me. And I was like, Really? Tell me. Tell me. And she's like, She has long red hair and she has a green dress with burgundy trim. I after I left her room, I went and wrote down all this because it was
Mhm.
so specific. And it was when I pulled the card for that girl who also had red hair, by the way, one of my listeners, Donna. And I'm looking at this card and she's got the same freaking dress on. I mean, she's exactly what my daughter had depicted. Just like, holy crap, this is like a lot of synchronicity, like really fast for me to know someone. That's how it kind of started with everything, with the divine feminine, with all of it. But yeah, my entry to the divine feminine was through Bridget, who, yeah, I really had no idea, never heard of her in my entire life.
And they'll come fast. The synchronicities, when a spirit is really reaching out to you, it's going to
Yeah.
come fast. And that's again where if we're looking at the symbolism, we're looking at the deeper meaning, the symbolism, the memory, and the pattern. And so this is where you've seen it, and then it shows up again. You're like, wait a minute, I'm recalling the information. Oh, wait a minute, this is what it means. This is the symbolism, right?
Yeah, it was so wild. And yeah, it was very brief though, too. Kind of like what
Hmm.
you said, which is why I mentioned it because, she came in, it was like the
Yeah.
introduction, like I am a goddess, like this is a real thing. And actually, I'm kind of a scholar too. So I know that there was a Saint Bridget of Kildare, but there's no proof of a Bridget. And what I've learned is that happened with lots of them. I mean, when anybody worshipped somebody. Even Saint Sophia is not actually a saint. I mean, you think it's a saint with her three children, hope, charity, and love. I mean, these they feared these women, and so they
Hmm.
sainted them.
Right.
So that way you would go to the church to worship them. The church always tried to like take claim with them.
Yeah, right. It's a lot easier to ease people into a new belief if you can kind of water it down and convert and to make it mirror what they're already doing. If someone's already doing something, let's just make it easier for them to do it over here or do it in our way. So there's a lot
Yeah.
of things that you can see when you parallel how culture has evolved, how the world and beliefs and religion and spirituality has evolved very much, very much. And I love that Bridget reached out to you and it felt somewhat brief. And I feel like it's like seasons. where
Yeah.
they will come to you when you need them. That's that meeting the mentor. If you look at Joseph Campbell, maybe you're going to look at the hero's journey and compare it to that. I like to look at the and tarot the fool's journey, and so each stage is of the major arcana is sort of a next level you get to, and so that goddess or that spirit or whatever you need in that stage, that season, that level is going to come to you right when you need them. And maybe it's a lifelong connection, or maybe it's one that it's there when you need them. And I think it's important, and like you've done, you've established that connection and relationship with that spirit. It's not just a tool that you're extracting the need from anymore.
Right.
Now that's your spiritual kin. That's
Oh
that,
yeah, it's definitely.
they're on your team.
It's beautiful too because I'm so happy that my children know that there is a goddess.
Yes.
Of course there is. Of course there is. How could there just be a God? That's been a huge part too, is that polarity, the dark and the light, right? That's been a huge part of understanding this energy coming through.
Yes. Oh, yes, absolutely. I had I don't get very direct messages too often. I tend to have to read signs and nature and things around me, and again, that deeper meaning,
Yeah.
the pattern and memory and symbolism. But I did recently go through a very traumatic experience. And I mean, I was just like in this trauma loop, and I'm like, well, how do I'm like, heal me, like, please heal me, goddess, please heal me, please. And she said, you have to heal yourself. This is much deeper than a surface wound. You have to heal yourself. You have to completely surrender and not exist anymore. And I thought, how do I do that? And I had this vision of just space, just black and stars, just space and just vast expansion. That's universal dark mother. It's just this never
Yeah.
ending universe. And how do I feel nothing? And then when I did a lot of work with cognitive brain function and reversing beliefs and breaking through all of those blocks, eventually it was like, I feel not like it was like detachment, I guess. I don't
Yeah.
feel the same way. And it was like, wow, I've surrendered. I feel nothing. And it was like, bam, there was that vision again of space. And I'm like, wow, that it came full circle. And they will, those messages that you get, they sure will. They will reveal themselves in time, in due course. That's the hard part, being patient.
It reminds me of the moon, right? Going through its cycles. You never know where
Mhm.
the moon's going to be. It's not a guarantee. It's not like the sun rising and setting in the same. And that's kind of how women are. We never quite know where we're going to fall day to day. And we have to be fluid with that, right? It reminds me of the trees too, and the seasons, and just being able to, let loose when we need to, and be bare.
Yeah. And that's
Yeah.
that feminine energy. If
Yeah.
someone doesn't want to gender it, you could really break it down to passive and active energy. So masculine might be more active and feminine
Mhm.
might be more passive. But of course, we are both, right? We have active and passive energy. And there's a time to be active. There's a time to really channel that sun or masculine energy. And then there's a time to be passive. There's a time to really channel that feminine moon energy. And
Mm.
it's about balancing them. I think that's the most important.
Yeah. Girl, I've been challenged by the sun over the past few years. So I've always been a moon person, always. Like she's
I've
my best
always been very drawn to the moon, but naturally it's taken me a long time to realize this because especially I'm in Aries, so I'm fiery, so I've got a lot of that active, masculine type energy. And so I've had to learn that I really need to lean into the moon more, really lean into that energy.
friend. Maybe it's because I'm a Taurus. I don't know.
Yeah, it could be,
Yeah.
dig into that a little more because that is that grounding energy,
Well, I think
that
it's
deeper
also
energy.
just like, that masculine energy from the sun is so
Yeah.
strong. And
Yeah.
as the sun has been going through its own cycle, at first, I was really affected. I mean, like very ill, like from it. I can call the solar storms like this, and my whole body is affected. And when someone had suggested to me one time, and it was a friend of mine, Ellen, she's like, why don't you go and sit with the sun? And I was like, yeah, yeah. So I like that moment. I looked outside and it was getting like golden hour. So I just sat there with the sunset and made peace with it in that moment. And I've never, ever felt the same with the sun. Now I go out and I sun gaze. But it was almost like me splitting that toxic masculine and really connecting with the
Yeah,
divine masculine, which is
yeah,
just as needed as the divine feminine right now.
absolutely, absolutely. We tend to have this very particular idea of masculinity and masculine energy. And sometimes, as women and living amongst the patriarchy, we tend to try to embody more of that masculine archetype and bring ourselves to that, when really our power is honestly in not being so loud sometimes. The power is being quiet and being more silent, not in a shy, sheepish way, but in that wise, strong and steady, stern sort of way.
Yeah.
When someone says something and you stop for like 10 seconds and then you say, "What exactly did you mean by that?" Instead of
Yeah.
flying off at the handle, right? That's really what that divine feminine is, I think. That
Yeah.
dark energy, not in a negative, dark way, but in that really embodied, strong, sovereign.
Yeah, there was this one time I was talking to this guy, and I had really fallen into and love the work of Helena Petrovna Blavatsky.
Hmm.
And I had mentioned that I was reading one of her books at the time, and he was like, "Oh, be careful, she's dark." I was like, "Oh, that's what all of you men think, about any woman." I mean, this is a powerful woman who, had to write under her initials in the 1800s, who had so much wisdom and dared to do so many things.
What's interesting too is they might look at you, they do look at me and think, well, she's a vanilla housewife. Oh, you have no idea the dark stuff I'm into.
Oh,
I'm a
I know.
witch.
Well, that's kind of funny that you say that because I always make a joke. Like, I was like, I'm just like your normal mom sitting at the school waiting for my kids studying Baphomet.
Yeah, nothing to
I
see
mean,
here.
right. Yeah, just your average, yeah, just like you said, your neighborhood witch, your neighbor
Yeah,
next door. Yeah. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. It's always so exciting to find someone who just might get some of the things that you experience or that you have experienced or that you might, or, because sometimes it can be lonely in this world of, mysticism and magic. And although it's getting, more normalized, it's still nice to know that there's someone out there that thinks witchy like I do.
absolutely. I have had such a blast chatting with you. Yeah, and I feel the same. It is growing. There are many of us, average everyday witches out here, that might just look like your normal girl next door, or what have you, mom with soccer mom, or mom with the SUV, or whoever we are. There's so many of us, but it is always good to sit down and talk and chat and find another kindred spirit. So I've had such a wonderful time being here.
Yeah, I know. I know my listeners are listening and feeling the same. Because I mean, that's why I like to do this podcast, is just there's so many of us out there. And so it's nice just to hear conversations about some of the stuff you may be experiencing. And if you want to, learn about spells or, this is the recipe book and it's got this cute little bookmarker.
Yes, good colors for spring, right? They're very bright and cheerful.
Love it so much. And manifestation, right? This is such a great time to do any kind of manifesting spells or anything new to rebirth, to birth something new into your life.
Yeah, the spring is upon us. It's a good time. Some spring cleansing. There's some cleansing things you could do. There's manifestation. I think there's
Oh,
even one with an egg, like you plant seeds in an egg. So if you want to get very seasonally appropriate, there's
yeah.
that. And I get really
Wait.
seasonal on YouTube and on Patreon. I do a lot about living in sync with the seasons and living by the flow of the moon. So that's where I kind of keep a lot of that content too.
I highly recommend your book. And I think that it's just like a good for all. Like, I don't feel that it leans into like one practice. I think that I saw stuff from like all cultures, all different, lands, and Yeah. What is your YouTube? And where can
It's
everybody find you?
Yes, on YouTube it's Naturally Modern Witch. On TikTok it's Naturally Modern Witch. Those are the places I'm most active. I am on Instagram as Naturally Modern, and then I have a website, Naturally Modern Witch, or it's Naturally Modern Life. Either one, you can find me.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks, Lacey.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I had a blast.
Bye. Take care.
Sense of Soul.